All right, we are making our debut here, the New York Football Show. Joining me is Frankie and Justin, two of the brains behind the operation. I'm Derek. You know me from Pinstripe Territory. I want to get right into it. We got the NFL season beginning tonight. Ravens versus Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes versus Lamar Jackson. Real quick from each of you, who you got? Let's start with you, Justin.
Oh man, that's a tough one. They're both really good teams. I think they're going to be both contenders this year. I'm going to go Chiefs.
Yeah. What about you, Frankie?
In a situation like this, usually on a Thursday night kickoff, home team has all the energy of having the Super Bowl banner raised up and crowd going nuts. I usually take the home team and the defending champions, and that's what I'm going to do here. I would not be surprised if we see these two teams face off in the AFC Championship next year or later this season in a rematch. But right now, I think it's going to be a great game, but I think Chiefs win this one.
The most important thing I got to ask you, Frankie, is Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce's breakup agreement, the contract, is that real? Or did you see that?
I have seen that. I don't think that's. I mean, who knows? It could just be a hey, break glass in case of emergency kind of thing, just in case like worst case scenario happens. I mean, that would break my heart. That'd be terrible for me, Derek, and for the millions of Swifties around the nation. But I mean, it is Taylor Swift though, so we've been down this road before. It's kind of like like when the Mets have a good start to April. It's like, all right, just wait. Like when Taylor has like, oh, she's been with this guy for 6 months. It's like, just wait. Let's see what happens.
So, all right, I want to talk a little bit of football because it's been a long time since I was a big football fan. When I was growing up, I was a big Dolphins fan. Marino was at the tail end of his career, and I was still a big Marino fan. And obviously Ace Ventura came out, and that made me even more of a Dolphins and Marino fan. But then he retired, and the Dolphins stunk for, I guess it's, about 2 decades now. So I kind of stopped watching, really, and I watched the NFL playoffs, but I just kind of want to get the landscape from you guys, because I'm going to be learning from you guys as we do this show, and you guys are the experts. So what's the NFL looking like this year? Let's start with you, Justin. Who's kind of the favorites? I mean, obviously the Chiefs are good every year, but who else are we looking at?
Well, I mean, it's kind of the usual suspects. You get your Chiefs, you get your Ravens. Dolphins look pretty strong as well in the AFC.
Finally.
Steelers, they upgraded their quarterback position theoretically with Russell Wilson.
Isn't he like 100 though?
He's getting there. He's younger than Aaron Rodgers, I think. But yeah, I mean, like
but he's taking the vaccine, so he's
Yeah, and then you have the Bengals. Joe Burrow is going to be back. If he can stay healthy, they're going to be tough to beat as well. In the NFC, you're looking at probably the Niners again. Looking at the Packers with Jordan Love. He's really coming on. Yeah, I mean, those are kind of the big ones that come to mind. I don't know if we're going to see any surprise teams. We probably will. We'll talk more about what surprise team I think is going to be this year, but yeah, I think that those are your contenders.
Frankie, who's your sleeper? Let's say that you take the Chiefs out of it. Let's just say that they have a bad year. Who's your pick for the Super Bowl in their absence?
If it's not the Chiefs, I'd probably say the Ravens. Yeah. I know that Lamar Jackson has a tendency to be terrible in the postseason, but I'm willing to say that eventually that's got to turn around. He's just too talented. He's too good of a quarterback to be this terrible his entire postseason career. I can see like a Peyton Manning thing for him where it just takes years and years, and then finally he gets over the hump. So yeah, Baltimore would be my pick there. San Francisco, of course, in the NFC. As we mentioned, Derek, your Dolphins are a really good team now. They have a great young quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa. Tyreek Hill, while by all accounts a really horrible human being, is the best receiver in the entire league. And his speed and the way he makes plays is just sensational. So keep an eye out for the Dolphins there. But yeah, if it's not the Chiefs and the Niners to me are so clearly the two best teams in terms of talent and just everything, that I just feel like it's going to be very difficult for someone.
Yeah.
There's only been one rematch ever, Super Bowl 27-28 Cowboys and Bills. So, there have been years I thought we could have had a rematch. Hasn't happened for almost 30 years, or over 30 years, I think now. If it's time to do it, why not?
Teams go there, but yeah, it's tough to get a rematch because it's just tough to get there to begin with.
So 2 things. So you mentioned the Cowboys. How are the Cowboys looking this year, Frankie? Because they got Dak Prescott. And I remember hearing all sorts of stuff about him when they, first drafted him, and he got off to a great start. But it seems like the Cowboys, like they're always like, there's a lot of talk about them, but they never do much. And Frankie just blacked out for a second. There we go.
Yeah, to me, I just all throughout last year when I was watching the Cowboys with Dak and Amari Cooper and watching them just be as dominant as they were, I kept saying like they're going to be out in the first round. I told everyone I know they're going to be out in the first round, and sure enough, they got blown out by Green Bay. I'm not going to expect anything different. No matter how talented this Cowboys team is, I still expect that they're going to be a first round exit until I see it. And Dak is obviously a very good quarterback. There's talent on both sides of the ball. Mike McCarthy, you live with him as coach, but I don't. There's just something about the Cowboys mindset, something about the Cowboys that just they cannot get it done in big spots. And I expect that's going to happen here. Eventually, that has to change. Like eventually, the Cubs won a World Series eventually, so eventually it's got to turn around. But until I see it, I'm not going to believe it.
Justin, Dolphins. Why is Tyreek Hill a bad guy, apparently? And also, last I heard, he was burning down his house. Like I remember turning on the news one day, and he's standing outside of his house, and it's on fire. What was the deal with that?
Yeah, I think the bad guy thing comes from he has some accusations, charges of beating a girlfriend.
Yeah, that's no good. No bueno.
Friend. But yeah, I mean that's kind of a few years ago. Since then, he's been kind of under the radar, other than house burning
and fathering like 100 children.
Well, does that make somebody a bad person? I mean,
it makes somebody a busy person.
Exactly.
It's tough to be that busy while you're a star football player. But yeah, I would not say he's the best person. I don't know him personally, but judging from the things you've heard, yeah, I receivers in general, I think, have a little bit of a diva mentality. And I think you kind of have to. Remember T.O., you remember Chad Johnson, Ocho Cinco, just the me stuff. I think he's got a lot of that me stuff going on. But yeah, he's obviously very talented. I am interested to see when the drop off happens because he's a smaller guy. Yeah. And once that speed starts to fade as he gets older, it's gonna be tougher for him to get open. He's had some pretty key drops, so he doesn't have the best hands. Yeah. His abilities are speed, shiftiness, getting open. So when that goes away, what happens to Tyreek Hill? And what happens to those millions of dollars the Dolphins have invested in him, right? He is getting to that age where it's like that speed starts to go.
Yeah, well, I mean, Tua apparently is he's pretty accurate. I mean, I've watched him a few times. I mean, will that kind of compensate for the speed? I mean, if you got a really accurate quarterback, you can theoretically, hook routes, things like that, where he doesn't necessarily need to outrun everybody.
If he can get open, right? So there's a lot of receivers that have exceptional route running ability, and they're not that fast. Mm-hmm. Guys like Larry Fitzgerald come to mind, where they could just get open. But he was a big body, right? Tyreek Hill's a little guy, so if he's not going to do the Wes Welker, Cooper Kupp impersonation, where he can just juke people out of their shoes on routes. He's going to have a tough time no matter how accurate Tua is.
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about the New York Jets because last year they were all the hype, all the rage. They get Aaron Rodgers, and he lasts approximately 10 minutes. And what was hilarious was that I was telling Frankie literally 5 minutes before it happened, I'm sure you remember this, Frankie, that I took the Jets as my Madden team last year. And in the first 5 minutes of my first game, Rodgers got sacked and tore his Achilles and was out for the season. And I messaged Frankie. I said, Frankie, Rodgers went down in my franchise. What do I do? Who can I use? And then it happened in real life. He messaged me. You were saying this about Rodgers. So how's it looking? Is he healthy? I remember there was some kind of weird stuff where he didn't attend a mandatory practice or a mandatory workout, just a few weeks ago. He was just on vacation or something like that. Is he becoming a little bit of a diva?
He's always been a diva, dude. It was a lot different when he had the youth and the talent to really just tell people to F off, right? Yeah. But now it's he's older. I think he's pretty much made up entirely of ayahuasca. I think he's just right. So I mean, he's he's older. He's probably taken a few hits, so the brains are a little scrambled. I still think he's got talent. My issue with Aaron Rodgers has always been how he pushes the blame off a lot to his receivers, to his line. It's never his fault, right? It's always his receiver's fault. He didn't run the right route. He didn't like. It's never like, oh, my bad. And that's why I like to see it as a quarterback saying every now and then. It doesn't have to be all the time. Oh, hey, that was my bad. And Manning was really good about that. Peyton Manning would always he'd hold his receivers accountable. He'd hold his linemen accountable. But when he screwed up, then he was like, yeah, that was me. And I haven't really seen a whole lot of that from Rodgers. So I don't know what that does to team chemistry. I'm not in the NFL, so I couldn't tell you. But I've been on teams, and when you have somebody like that on a team, it sucks, right?
Yeah.
Whether or not they're really talented or not, it's a morale thing, and like people don't want to like go to bat for you. And he's not been there long enough to like build a camaraderie. And when you're skipping out on camps to go on vacation, you're not really showing leadership. You're not showing that you want to lead the team. So he better do it with his arm, because he's on one leg right now. All right.
Frankie, do you concur? Do you think that Rodgers is kind of lacking in the leadership area?
I would assume he certainly is lacking in terms of making it seem like smart decisions off the field and keeping his name out of headlines. Because you want to talk about divas, it's just every week it seems like with this guy. He's spending some conspiracy theory. He's trying to be RFK's running mate. Like there's just all this stuff off the field. It's like I'm just so sick of like, dude, get on the field, throw the ball, do what you're good at. And I have the same concerns, which is Rodgers is 41 years old. And yes, he's 40 years old. He's going to be 41 at the end of the season. He's a great quarterback, no denying that. But coming back from a torn Achilles at this age, I mean, how many guys have done that and been able to be as effective?
Testaverde is the only one I can think of that came back from an Achilles and was like pretty good afterwards. And honestly, an Achilles injury like that, that's more going to affect you when you're doing like athletic things like running, jumping. I think that he isn't much of a runner anymore.
Right.
So as long as they can protect him so he doesn't have to scramble so much, the Achilles shouldn't be an issue. But I do worry about like that 300-pound guy that falls on it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, that was the issue last year, protecting him. There was, whispers that it was going to be difficult for the offensive line to protect him. And then, it lasted 5 minutes. So we'll see how that shakes out again. But, let's say they don't protect him. Let's say he goes down again. Do they have enough to be a playoff team without a stud Aaron Rodgers? What do you think?
So last year they really rode their defense, and the defense was solid to very good, but they only finished with a 7-10 record, so they were third in the division. The good news is they won't be as bad as the Patriots. The bad news is I don't think they've got enough, even with Rodgers, to catch the Bills or the Dolphins. Yeah. I think both those teams are so much further ahead, but I do think they have the pieces to be competitive. They did sign some new players or trade for some new players on the line to upgrade that line. They were like one of the worst in the league for sacks allowed last year, even without Rodgers in under center. So they picked up Morgan Moses from Baltimore, one of the best linemen in the league. They signed Tyron Smith, who is a legendary lineman, but he's also like 40 years old. He's on his way too. He's got injury history, so we'll see how that goes. So they've got the blind side and they've got the front side kind of shored up as long as everybody's healthy. So they probably won't have to worry about Rodgers. If they do lose Rodgers for any extended period of time, they did pick up Tyrod Taylor as a backup quarterback. Now, I don't know if he's much of an upgrade over what they had last year. Like Zach Wilson showed moments of promise, but I think he suffered from the same problem Rodgers did. They didn't have a line to protect him. Wilson's now in Denver. They got rid of him. They brought in Tyrod Taylor. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Defensively, they lost their best pass rusher, Bryce Huff, and they picked up Hassan Reddick from the Eagles to maybe help that out as well. But I think the defense is still going to be good. Offensively is going to be a question mark as well. Rodgers is going to be an upgrade, obviously, of what they had last year, but keeping Rodgers healthy is going to be the key.
Let's talk a little bit about the Giants, Frankie. Obviously, as Yankee fans, most of our comrades are Giants fans. I think you lean kind of heavily towards the Giants as well. How are they looking this year?
Well, as we talked about yesterday, I don't see much upside with this team, especially with Daniel Jones starting. And there are going to be there are some great players, especially on the defensive side. The front seven is going to be real legit. But when you get into the secondary, that's going to be an issue. There's a lot of weakness in that secondary. There's a bunch of young guys, on the offense. So trying to replace Saquon. So Malik Neighbors is going to be the thing I look forward to watching this year, seeing him develop. But outside that, again, as long as Daniel Jones is the starter for this team, I just think this team is going to be, and as long as we have the offensive line that we do, which is bad, I don't know how it is in the NFL. It's about a decade now since this team's had a decent offensive line. How is that possible that you go this long and you can't put together just an average offensive line? Like that to me is just sickening. But
what's up with Daniel Jones? Why has he not lived up to the hype when he was drafted?
It was weird because when he was drafted, Giants fans were, I think, for the most part, just pretty outraged. We're like, my gosh, like this is the guy we traded up to get, a top 10 pick, and this guy who wasn't even the top quarterback in his class, and he mostly floundered for a few years. And yes, you can blame that on the offensive line. You can blame that on maybe the Giants didn't have enough weapons for him. Finally came together in 2022 with Brian Daboll as coach and put together a good team around him. And then, but I thought he was good in 2022, but I didn't think he was worthy of the $160 million deal they gave him. When I heard that was the offer that was presented to him, I'm like, you can just draft somebody, you can pick somebody up. You don't have to pay this guy $160 million. But they did, and so now the Giants are stuck with him for at least this year, and maybe next. We'll see how that whole thing works out. But it's just he's not developed as quick as he should. You look at some of these other quarterbacks who are around the same time, and he's just still stuck. And you watch him in the preseason game this year, and he's still making throws that you're in year 6, man. You got to be better than this.
So is he just like throwing into coverage or whatever?
Yeah, just stupid interceptions like that. So I'm just not sold on him. Maybe, we're gonna have to live with it. So this is his last chance. But I'm just not confident. I know that Justin disagrees and think he can be a little bit better. But I don't know. To me, I'm still concerned about where he's going because I just haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen the consistency with Jones yet.
Justin, how do you feel about the Giants?
Yeah, I agree for the most part. Like Jones does have to show a little more this year, and hopefully the line has been upgraded enough to do that. My concern is with how they paid him. Like you're absolutely right. He didn't really earn that contract. He'd be an idiot not to take it, of course. But now the Giants have all this money tied up in a mid quarterback, right? That means they can't re-sign Saquon, so he walks over to Philly, right? Now you got to settle for Devin Singletary at running back, which he's pretty good, but he's no Saquon. And Saquon, if he couldn't find success with that line, what's Devin Singletary going to do, right? Receivers, you could have signed a big name receiver. The line stuff, it's hard in the NFL, I think, to find a solid 5-man offensive line and always have them together, because offensive line is one of those positions you have to pay. You can get lucky and draft a good one and have a cheap guy for a few years, but at some point he's going to cost you like $20 million a year, right?
Yeah.
And you've only got so much money, and if you pay everyone on your line $20 million a year, you've got nothing left. It's a balance, and I get why it's hard to build a line, but you're right. They have. I don't think they've even really focused enough on the line. I feel like they thought, oh, well, we got a guy who can run around the back with Jones, and Saquon can make people miss, so we don't really need to worry about the line so much. But Jones coming off a torn ACL, he's going to have to be able to move a little bit better than you would normally with a torn ACL, right? So let's see how he does with that. He's been always a guy who uses his legs, even at Duke. Great scrambler. But the throwing has to get better. The decision-making has to get better. He probably needs to kind of revert more to like game management rather than trying to make big plays. And Josh Allen has this same problem where he'll scramble around and try to force something rather than take a check down or taking the extra 5 yards, right? But Jones is not Josh Allen. Like Josh Allen gets this sometime, but Daniel Jones is him.
That's a good segue. Let's talk a little bit about the Bills because they're probably the best team in New York. And, Jets and Giants, not technically in New York, so they're the only team in New York. But how are we feeling about the Bills this year, Frankie? It seems like they've done some, they've made some noise the last few years. I have some Bills fans, family members, and I have some Bills fans, co-workers, ex-co-workers that I kind of keep in touch with. And I just remember them being so psyched in the playoff time and then being so disappointed. I didn't watch the game last year where they lost to end everything. But what are your thoughts on the Bills?
Well, I think the Bills will do fine as long as they don't face the Chiefs. That seems to be just year after year. They run into Kansas City and Kansas City just owns them. And this year it's going to be a little different now that they've lost Stephon Diggs. They've lost some guys in the secondary. So they're probably going to take a step back, but you still have Josh Allen. And I've heard some people say, maybe the Bills window is closed or closing. And no, I disagree. As long as you have a great quarterback, as long as you have a top 5 quarterback like Josh Allen, your window is always open. I actually think, this might be a hot take, I actually think Allen's going to win MVP this year. I think he's going to be motivated to, without Diggs, to show an even greater side of himself, to improve his game. So I expect Allen to have just an awesome season. I mean, of course, you always got to worry about Mahomes in that situation in terms of MVP, but I think this is the time for Josh Allen to do it. Lamar, yes. So we got a lot of good quarterbacks in the AFC. You look at Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Lamar. It's just Herbert. It's just loaded. And I'm sure I'm missing somebody there. And Tua, you just got so many great quarterbacks. It's just a cornucopia of terrific young quarterbacks in the AFC. So it's going to be tough, but I think Allen can do it. And my prediction right now, I think they do win the AFC East. I think they barely beat out the Jets, but I don't see them getting into the Super Bowl again, especially with a team like Kansas City or Baltimore, for that matter, that they have to contend with.
Justin, thoughts on the Bills?
So my main concern is that they not only lost Stephon Diggs, they also lost Gabe Davis, who was pretty inconsistent, but still, he's a proven NFL receiver. And they've basically replaced them with rookies and retreads. So Curtis Samuel comes over from the Skins, decent talent, but really has never put it together. Like, he's just always kind of been on the outside looking in. And then you got Khalil Shakir. He's promising, speedy guy, but they don't have anyone to throw it to. And my issue with the Bills is it's like they play in Buffalo. It gets really cold in the winter. And we saw it in the playoffs. They are not a cold weather team. Huh. They don't have a running game to support being a cold weather team. So when they played the Bengals in that snowy game and they lost, the Bengals were built for that because they had Joe Mixon and they had just enough receivers to do what they needed to do in that game. The Bills aren't built for that. They would be better off like playing in Miami because they've got such a high octane quarterback, loves to chuck it downfield. But once it starts getting cold and snowy, that ball gets harder. It's slipperier. It's tough. So, a cold weather team, should have a good power running game. And all the Bills really have at this point is James Cook. And he's more of like a kind of a hybrid back guy that comes out of the backfield, catches passes, can run through the tackles a little bit. But yeah, I don't know if they win the division this year, actually. I think the Dolphins might actually overtake them. I don't think the Jets are really in. I think they're in third place again. I think they're sniffing the playoffs, maybe at 8-8, maybe 9-7 or something. But yeah, I see it's a Bills and Dolphins 1-2.
Well, don't they play 17 games now?
Oh yeah, forgot. So
I'm not even the football expert here. Come on.
8. Yeah, I forgot.
Or is it just math? Yeah. Is it just math problems that you have there?
Yeah, I'm an idiot. It's just like stupid. But yeah.
But all right, so you talk about cold weather teams. It seems like the Dolphins always have issues. They always have to go to Buffalo late in the season. Are they built, with the proper running? I know that they've got Hill who can run and outrun guys, and that should help a little bit, especially if you deflate the balls maybe a little bit. That's a great idea. Somebody should have that idea and try that. But yeah, but do you think the Dolphins match up well with the Bills in cold weather this year?
Yeah, so Dolphins, like what they've done is they've built a speed team, right? They've got Tyreek Hill, they've got Jalen Waddle, they've got Shane, they've got Mostert, just like blazers, right? Great on turf, great in the warm weather. If you've ever walked in snow, you can't really get your footing. So that speed is negated So now you need to like win it in the trenches. You need to win it with physical play. You need to run the ball through the tackles, and you got to have a defense that can hold up. Dolphins lost Christian Wilkins to the Raiders, so their interior is a little less beefy, right? So I mean, they've lost some people, and they're built for speed. I don't know that you build a team for speed if you want to make a long playoff run, because you're going to be playing in the winter. You're going to obviously have to go to these places like Kansas City, Baltimore, Buffalo, which are all just freezing at that time of year. So unless you've got home field advantage, which the Dolphins need to win their division to do that. But otherwise, a speed team is no good when it's cold and snowy.
All right, so before we get out of here, I just want to get everybody's Super Bowl pick. I'm going to go with the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, obviously a great duo. You got the air game, the ground game. Frankie, who you got? Who's your Super Bowl pick?
Same as you. Ravens over the Niners in the Super Bowl. I think Lamar finally gets over the ghost of playoff past and gets a title over Brock Purdy, who, while good, I still don't see him as a Super Bowl winning quarterback. So Ravens beat the Niners in the Super Bowl.
Justin, who you got?
So, I mean, Brock Purdy could be a Super Bowl winning quarterback because Brad Johnson did it.
Yeah.
Trent Dilfer did it.
Yeah.
And they did it with a stout defense, right? They had the Ravens defenses. Honestly, I could see the Niners winning it. The Ravens are good enough to win it. The question is, does Lamar Jackson show up for the playoffs? And I'm not saying he's not showing up on purpose. Like, I think teams have schemed enough to like make him throw the ball. And honestly, last year their exit had more to do with that offensive coordinator not running the ball enough. Like you run the ball all year, you're a great running team, and then all of a sudden you want to try to air it out, and that's just you can't go away from what works. That said, I do see the Ravens probably winning it over the Niners, but I could see the Niners beating the Ravens, so I'll hedge a little bit. And as far as a sleeper team, I don't think we ever talked about them here. The Texans have a really solid team here. C.J. Stroud, really good young quarterback, and they've got just like boatloads of receivers. They picked up Joe Mixon for the running game. They might be a little bit of a sleeper, dangerous team to play this year.
So why is nobody picking the Chiefs? I mean, they've been obviously the best the last few years. Why are you guys not high on the Chiefs? Start with you, Frankie.
Because it's hard to three-peat. I mean, it's never happened in the Super Bowl era. And if we look at it objectively, the Chiefs are probably the most talented team and that they're more likely to get back. But it's hard for me to say this team is going to win 3 in a row because it's never happened before. So I'm just not going to – I'm going to just be safe and say that something is going to go wrong.
Yeah, I mean, they've kind of like smoke and mirrored their way to some wins in the playoffs, and most of that's Pat Mahomes, right? Yes. Last year they had trouble at the receiver spot with drops. This year they've gotten rid of Kadarius Toney. They've picked up Xavier Worthy in the draft. The question is, does Rashee Rice play the entire season, or does he end up in jail for the hit and run? Right? I mean, Travis Kelce, is he going to be so depressed after getting dumped by Taylor Swift and having to hear the breakup song on the radio every day? Is he going to be able to fight through that? Is he going to be able to power through it and be the Travis Kelce of old? And he is getting old. I mean, he's going to slow down. We saw a little bit of it last year. So there are concerns there. Is the defense going to be good enough? But with Pat Mahomes, you always have a chance.
Yeah. Go ahead, Frankie. Final thoughts.
I mean, breakup or not, Travis just got $100 million deal for his podcast, so I think he's doing all right.
Is he gonna wipe the tears with $100 bills?
That's what I was thinking. Like, I hope Amazon has an opt out, just in case the breakup happens, because I mean that podcast might be worth $100 million now. If Taylor's no longer in the picture, it is not. So I hope Amazon has got everything in order there.
I'll tell you what, this podcast is definitely worth $100 million. So if anybody wants to write me a check, I'm here. I'm waiting, and we'll cash it, and we'll we might be able to afford a couple of football helmets for the background or whatever. But final thoughts, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, I think that with Kelce, it comes down to if he can stay healthy. I wonder if the podcast and stuff, the external stuff's a little bit of a distraction for him. He is getting to the point where it's almost time to retire. His brother just retired. Yeah, maybe he's starting to think about it a little bit, right? So maybe he's not as focused. Maybe he's not as driven this year. having 2 Super Bowl rings will do that to you. I mean, it breeds complacency when you win so much. So are they going to be complacent this year? But I do think it's going to be an exciting NFL season, and I'm happy to talk more about it on these podcasts.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching the first episode of the New York Football Show. I think in maybe Tuesday we'll be back, kind of review everything that went down this weekend, including Monday Night Football. We'll talk about all that stuff. Remember to like and subscribe, or don't. I don't care, whatever. But go ahead and if you enjoyed it, go ahead and like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.